Imagine you move from a place where you lived all your life. Imagine you move and you leave all your children and wife. Starting all over again, but no one you know is around. Well, they didn't have to imagine. They built it up from the ground. How does it sound? Not easy because it isn't. Could have praised them, but it didn't. But the Ray Bond, that's a winner. And they ran straight to the finish. You get to know them up close and personal. Wait, just give me a minute. Welcome to the front row. Can I get a drum roll? Intentional. We may be immigrants, but we are still intentional. We are dependable. It's just that set the bar, but still the best of all. We are intentional.
Welcome to the Intentional Immigrants podcast. Thank you so very much for joining me for season 2. We will walk in the footsteps of children of immigrants. I'm your host, Yolanda Jack. Our guest for today is Jay Falcone. Jay's parents came to Canada from the country of Italy. Let's listen to Jay's story, born in Canada with a heart for Italy. Let's tune in. Hi, Jay. Welcome to the Intentional Immigrants podcast. I'm happy that you're able to join me today for this session. Tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, so I guess a little bit about myself, Jay Falcone. My real name is Eugenio Falcone, but no one can say that properly. So we just go with Jay because all my friends could only get Jay out of Eugenio when my mother was calling me. So that's how I ended up with Jay. So professionally and through my friends, that's what they call me. I've been in Fort McMurray now for 37 years. So I came here right after university and work at one of the oil sands plants, and I work in human resources in the pensions and benefits area. Just a little bit about my background. I was born and raised in Edmonton, but my parents, all my family's from Italy.
Okay.
So they immigrated from Italy in the late 50s. And so my dad and my grandfather came first, and they started looking for work. They worked for a couple of years, and then all of my dad's side immigrated here to Canada. Then my mother came, and they had known each other back in Italy, but had never dated or anything. And she came here, and they got married. And so all my mother's side is still in Italy, but all my father's side is here.
Is in Canada. Okay.
Yeah.
Have you had the chance to go to Italy?
Yeah, fortunately, I've gone, I think, 3 times now.
What's the earliest age that you went?
The earliest age was I was in grade 8, and I went with my grandparents because my grandparents, they obviously wanted to go back, and they had only been back, I think, twice. Oh. And so I went with them the first time, which was really good because they were able to, show me, where they came from. And it was just a really good experience. And then the second and third time I went alone while I was working. I went down and stayed in where my mother's family is, and had a really good time there. So it was really good. I want to go back, obviously.
Yes, that must have been a very interesting experience for you, because being at home, you learned some of the traditions, I suppose, some of the Italian traditions and stuff. But going into Italy itself and being immersed in the culture, how did that feel?
Well, it was kind of interesting because I think you bring up a good point, because, I was practically raised by my grandparents because we all lived in one house, like many immigrants do when they come over to Canada. My grandparents lived downstairs, and I lived with my parents upstairs. But, so I was, practically raised by my grandparents. And, my grandparents would tell me all these stories about, the town that they came from in Italy, and so did my parents. So, names of people and things like that. So it was kind of interesting because when I went to Italy, it was almost like I was there and I knew everybody.
That's good.
So that was the Tony, the shopkeeper, and this guy was, Ralph the bricklayer, and and then I knew about the priest at the church, even though you'd never met me. But all these stories that my family told me came to life when I went to Italy in this little town, right? So it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, when you went and experienced it, that's the value of the story, or telling the oral tradition, as we call it. Yeah, because if we don't have that oral tradition, what you find is that the next generation will lose out on what it was like, or some experiences that our parents have.
Exactly. And that's the power, right? And it keeps going. And it's something that I've always remembered, obviously. And, I can tell, my son about it too now.
Okay, that's good. All right. From your experience, would you say that your living situation, being a child of immigrants, was it different from those of your classmates?
Yeah, in some respects it was, right? Obviously living in the same house with
grandparents, that's different. Yes,
that's not usual in kind of North American culture, right? People typically go off and start their own nuclear family. So I think that was different. Also I think being raised with family traditions and family values very strong. Okay, not to say that other cultures don't have that, or North American cultures didn't have that, but family, every Sunday the whole family would come over, so cousins and aunts and uncles.
Right. So you have a family reunion every week?
Every weekend, man. Every Sunday you can smell the tomato sauce going and the spaghetti going and everything, right? So it was different that way, right? In that a lot of my friends didn't have that, and again, nothing bad about that, but it was different. Like family was a very important value, and you spent as much time with your family as you could, right?
Yes. Okay. What about the language? You said you lived with your grandparents lived with you, or you lived with your grandparents. I don't know how you want to put it, but did they speak their native tongue at home?
Of course, yeah. So my first language was Italian. I actually learned Italian before I learned English.
Okay.
And and it was really interesting because it wasn't the proper Italian, it was a dialect, right? Because as you know, in different parts of every country, right, there's different dialects. So I learned it's called Calabrese, which is from Calabria, which is the southern part of Italy. Which is different than the proper Italian, but it was just as good, because that was my again my first language. So it was interesting because when I would travel and went to Italy, obviously I had that language, and because
that was an asset to you.
Very much, right? Because you could actually understand what people were saying, and you could talk. And it just, obviously, when you know a language of the country that you're going to, it just sheds a totally different light. And then in addition to that, because Italian is one of the, the Romance languages, very similar to French and very similar to Spanish. When I traveled to anywhere like in Mexico or South America, even with my Italian, I could understand Spanish, and learning Spanish became very, I wouldn't say easy, but easier than I had known nothing, right? So very valuable to have that second language. And I always tell people that, because sometimes, you get new Canadians, immigrants that come to this country, and sometimes people think, well, okay, well, they're, just an immigrant. But if you think about it, the fact that they know another language makes them more intelligent than the average person that just knows one, right?
Yeah.
And I always remember that's such a valuable thing, right? That those individuals, not only are they learning English, but they have another language under their belt that they could use when they go to their country, or they go to another country that speaks that language. So, never underestimate the intelligence of an immigrant, because it is powerful.
Okay, thank you. What are some struggles or challenges that you had as an immigrant child?
Yeah, and I don't know if they were struggles, but remember I was talking about the importance of family values. I think my parents and a lot of immigrant parents, because of the struggle in coming to a new country, they want their children obviously to do well, and so education becomes
a big thing.
very important value.
It's a big
right?
thing, yeah.
So I think the pressure that I found that maybe not as much in my Canadian friends is the pressure to do well, right? And it wasn't necessarily something that my parents, put pressure on you, but it was something that was instilled in you that you wanted to do well because you knew of the sacrifices that your parents made, right?
Yes.
And so. And again, I don't know if that's a struggle, but it was more of a self-imposed pressure. So there's that. I never experienced discrimination, but my father talked about it. Okay. My uncle talked about it. My uncle came from Italy also with the rest of the family, and he was a teacher in Italy. But when he came here, it didn't mean anything. Yeah. So he was, in his early 20s, and he had to go to high school to get grade 12. And then he had to get English, and then he went on to university. So you can imagine how, again, someone like that's a little bit more mature. And remember, back then, I guess this was in the 60s. I mean, you didn't have mature students going back to university. It was typically, kids going out of high school that went there. So, yeah. He was always the oldest. Right. And he had an accent, very strong accent from Italy. And, so he experienced, discrimination. My dad did, but, either I was protected from it or I didn't experience it as much. Maybe it was because, I look like an average Canadian, but really didn't get that a lot when I was growing up. We had, I had friends that were, from everywhere. Right. I had a lot of, indigenous friends because I lived in a downtown area. Okay. Lots of Italian, Portuguese, German, all types, and we all grew up together, and we were all just one, big group of friends, right? So I didn't experience some of the struggles that I think that some immigrants, kind of experience, when they come from another country.
Okay. Can I ask how old was your father when he came over?
He was, I believe he was like about 19 years old.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
What profession was he involved in?
Okay. So my dad, like many immigrants that came from Europe at the time, and there was really two waves of immigration. The first immigration happened after World War I, and a lot of those Europeans, specifically Italians, went to United States. Okay. And then after the Second World War, all the mass immigration after that, a lot of the Europeans came to Canada. So, my dad came to Canada, and like a lot of them, they did construction, right? That was what they knew, or what they,
what was easy to get involved in?
I'm sorry?
And what was also easy to get involved in?
Yeah, exactly. It was kind of that they needed work, a lot of development going on, infrastructure. So he started off doing construction, and then he got a job working at the government of Alberta as a shipper and receiver, and he was there, I think, like over 30 years.
Wow!
And he worked there. So that was really his, his career.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Are there any other high points or highlights of being an immigrant child? You mentioned the fact that you were able to live with family or live with extended family. So you had a community going. You mentioned the fact that you also had weekly family reunion, for want of a better word. Are there any other high points or anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, I just think the values that are passed on to kids of immigrants, uh, again, I'm speaking generally, is that, because of the struggles that the parents have gone through, whatever it is, right? Whether, if you think about it, coming to a new country, right? With sometimes nothing, right? Coming to a new country, taking that bold step, those values are passed on to kids, right? They're children, right? And I think that as we get older, or as I've been getting older, I realize the sacrifices that my parents did for me in coming over from, a new country. Because I look at myself and I say, could I just pick up and just move to another country where I don't know the language, I don't know the culture, I might not like the climate, right? And that's such a big change in your life.
Yeah.
And as kids of immigrants, we look at that and we value that, right? And it makes us more appreciative, I think, of the things that we have, because you realize that if it wasn't for that move, where would your life be today? Like, I don't know. Like I'd probably be in Italy. I don't know what I'd be doing, right? It's so
the
it's that type of,
the opportunities that you have are so different than if you were back home. I am assuming.
Yeah, no, exactly. I believe that's the case, because I've got a lot of my family back in Italy that, I look at, their lives and where they've gone, and it's different, right?
Yeah, it is. What is your current profession / business? I know that you do operate a business. You want to tell us a little about that?
Yeah, so like I said before, I work at Syncrude. It's obviously an oil company up here. I've been there ever since I got out of university. So back in 1984, I started. So and I worked in different areas. I worked in human resources. I've worked in the accounting department. I was a supervisor in the mine. So I've done a lot of different things. But over the last 8 years, I set up a company called Prospero Financial Solutions Limited. And what I do there is I teach financial literacy, as you know. So, one of my passions is to really, teach people about finances because it's such an important aspect of our lives, right? And so
why do you think it's such an important aspect?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, if you think about it, almost everything that we do on a daily basis, or we make financial decisions every day, right?
Even without thinking about it sometimes, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you get up in the morning and you decide, okay, am I going to make my lunch today, or am I going to buy it, right? Even when we go grocery shopping, it doesn't seem like a big financial decision, but the way you shop could save you money. And with that money, what do you do with it? So, and money is something that we give, let's say you give kids for their birthday and stuff. So we get money at an early age, but we don't get taught how to manage it, right? And it's not done in the schools. And again, nothing against the schools. It's just that it's not taught. So if you think about it, a skill that we need every day as adults isn't taught at school. So where do you get that skill, right? Well, sometimes you learn from your parents, and that's good. But sometimes, if our parents are doing a good job of managing money, we take on some of those values or habits. So, financial literacy is important for everyone, and especially for people that are immigrants, as you know, because they are coming from another country where the financial systems could be different than where they came from. The banking is different. The credit, your credit when you come over is totally different, and you can't use it here, right? Because it doesn't mean much here.
And some countries don't have a credit system or don't have a credit-based system.
Yeah, and then how about income taxes on top of that, right? Very confusing, very difficult. Investments, what do you do with that? Insurance. So if you think about it, excuse me, I'm just gonna ignore this. So if you think about it, not only do you have those struggles that you, as a new immigrant coming to like a place like Canada, you got to learn the English language. You got to learn, you got to learn all these other things. It's a new culture. It's a new climate. In addition to that, you have all this financial stuff that makes a big difference in how you live, right? Because it's very difficult to make a living at times. So, like I said, one of my passions is really to teach people that so that they have the skills and that they can also pass those skills on to their children so that they can make good financial decisions that help them have a good life, whatever they want to do, whatever kind of lifestyle they want.
Yes, thank you. Can I ask, why did you get involved in accounting and financial literacy? Why? Okay. What was the passion? What was the driving force?
Okay, so accounting, and you got to think about this because a lot of people say, "Wow, you've got an MBA, you got an accounting degree, you must know a lot about financial literacy." But again, like I was saying before, the financial literacy is more about personal finances, and because even though I've got that background, I didn't learn about personal finances until I started doing it myself. Because if you think about it, accounting is a profession. So they teach you how to go out and get a job as an accountant, right?
And manage other people's money.
That's right. Well, it's more about, recording
the transaction.
Transactions for companies or whatever, right? It doesn't teach you about how to manage money, right? So there's a difference there, right? So, accounting to me I wanted to go into it because I like business and I wanted to learn about that.
Okay.
So I chose that as a profession. But then it wasn't until I started learning on my own personal finances that I started, developing some experiences, made a lot of mistakes. And through that's why I want to obviously teach other people
about the knowledge
about financial literacy, right? So it's almost like two separate things, right?
Yeah.
And they talk about this, that even financial advisors don't always make good personal financial decisions because they're doing a profession which is different than how you manage your own money, right?
Yeah. Okay. Are there any traits or characteristics, you may have alluded to this earlier, but are there any traits or characteristics that you think you have inherited from your parents?
Yeah,
resilience, risk-taking,
I think obviously hard work ethic. Like if I look at my parents, I mean, my dad worked full-time in the government, but then in the evening, he also had a job as a custodian at a college. Okay. And I remember as a kid going with him, and I would go into the gym and play, basketball and everything while he, worked from about 6 to 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock in some cases. So, very strong work ethic.
So your father had a side hustle.
He had a yeah, and same with my mother. I mean, she worked full time. She was a seamstress and she worked at Tip Top Tailors for a lot of years. She worked at a department store in being a tailor and a seamstress. And, they just, worked hard and, came home and, so I think the work ethic was something that I picked up obviously from them, but also, family values, the importance of developing, good family and friendships are important. The home was always open. People would always come visiting. I don't know, we don't do that as much anymore, but I remember, the highlight of, my week was, we'd go over to people's homes and visit, right? People would come over to our parents' home and visit. Like I said, Sunday was always family day, right? There was always, you looked forward to that. And I think we probably don't do as much of that anymore, right?
Yeah.
Now it's more like, I don't want to disturb Jay, so I'm not going to go see him. Whereas before, it was a bit different. So
it was open. It was more open and welcoming.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe it's because even in Canada, we're so polite that we don't want to disturb anybody, right? Yeah. But it was nothing to have my uncle come over at 9:30 at night for a coffee, right? It was it was no big deal, right?
And he didn't have to call beforehand.
I'm sorry. Yeah, exactly.
He didn't have to call beforehand.
Yeah, no, exactly. You just show up, right? And it was like, okay. Or people would just say, you know what, we're going to come and see you tonight. And it's like, yeah, you get out, bit of coffee, some sweets, and you're done and you had a good time. And, so that was another trait that I think that, my parents instilled in us as kids.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Share a morning routine which has helped you well.
Oh, okay. So a morning routine. So, yeah, I discovered something, a few years ago that, we're all busy, right? Everybody's busy. If you talk to anybody, how's it going? I'm busy, right? Everybody's busy. But if you think about it, everybody has 24 hours, right?
Yeah.
Right? 24 hours in a day for everybody. Doesn't matter. So the way you manage your time is very important. So, I have a lot of things that I want to accomplish during the day, right? So I found that, I was either too tired to do it at night or it just didn't get done, right? It's one of those things that if you don't do it, it doesn't get done. Mm-hmm. So, I was reading about, successful people, they get up early and they do more in the first couple of hours than the average person does by 10 o'clock in the morning. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I find that for me, my morning routine is I wake up between 5 and 5:30. Right. Okay. And I do about a half an hour of exercise. Mm-hmm. I do another about 20 minutes of planning my day, looking at my goals, what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. I take some time to either meditate or pray. Mm-hmm. And you know what? It sets my whole day. And like I said, by the time I get to work at 7:30, I've already done more than an average person. And it's not because of me. It's just that you have to make time for your priorities, right?
Yes.
And it's changed my whole life, my whole perspective. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes, if you wake up late, you kind of feel like the day's gone, right? You feel like, yeah. And it's kind of interesting because your body gets used to that, right? So even on a weekend,
you're getting up early, yeah.
Yeah, like I say, I'm going to sleep in. It doesn't happen because your body says, "Hey, buddy, you got to wake up. It's 5:30, right?
Yes, yes.
Get up." So it's the importance of habits and good habits that you get into. So that's sort of my morning routine that I find that has been very, very good for me anyway.
Okay. I know that financial literacy is your passion. Mm-hmm. So I know this question is gonna, bring back a lot of books, but I'm gonna ask you, recommend a must-read book, a book which you have read or are reading and it has helped you well.
Okay, well, I've read a lot of books, but one book that I've read over and over again, and I actually have it here, is
Think and Grow Rich.
Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. So don't let the title fool you and think that, well, this is about making tons of money and stuff like that. If you notice, the title says Think and Grow Rich. And Napoleon Hill was a journalist. He's from Virginia in the United States. And what he did was he went out and he was, in the 30s and 40s. He went out, his task was to interview individuals that were successful financially. And what he did was he went out and he talked to people like Thomas Edison and B.F. Goodrich, the guy that, did the tires, a lot of successful men and women. And what he found, and you got to think about this, that he wrote this after the Depression, right, in the States, where things were just chaotic for people and lots of people lost everything. And he went out and he was thinking that he was going to hear people say, well, you know what, I bought real estate here, or I bought, you know, the best place to buy real estate is New York, or I bought this stock and it went like this. And what he found was that all these individuals that were successful, they thought differently than the average person. Oh. So he talks about the importance of a proper mindset, not only thinking positively, and this is not about, well, okay, I'm going to think I'm rich and I'm going to get rich. It's more about starting with things in the mind. So one of my favorite quotes of Napoleon Hill is, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Right? So everything starts with something in the mind. And if you think about even for immigrants that come over to Canada, right? They must have thought about, you know what? It would be so good for me to go to Canada and start new, or, you know, have something for my family, that type of thing. It all starts with a thought. Yeah. And not a wishful thought, right? It's not like, you know, I wish I won the lottery. Okay. Or I dream of winning the lottery, or I dream of immigrating to Canada. It was more of, you know what, I have a sincere desire to move to Canada. I have a sincere desire to open up my business. I have a sincere desire to finish my university degree. You notice the difference? And so when he went and interviewed these people, he found that successful people have a proper mindset. So it's the kind of book that I read. It was written in the 30s. Okay. And you read it today and it applies to common day. And in fact, a lot of successful people, you know, very financially successful people talk about this book. And so it's one of those books that I guarantee you that if you read it, you will learn so much, and you can apply it to all aspects of your life, right? It's not only about being financially successful, it's about everything, right? Having the proper attitude, the proper mindset, and then getting to the point where you desire something so much that you're going to do whatever it takes to get there, right? Whatever habits that you need to develop in your life so that you can get to that goal, you're going to do, right? So that is one book that you should read. And as I tell my students, if you buy this book, okay, and you read it and it doesn't change your thinking, then let me know, because I'll pay for half of the book for you. Okay. And guess what? In 8 years, Yolanda, no one's ever come back and said, Jay, you got to give me my money. I need a refund. So either they didn't read the book or it's work. So okay. What advice would you give to immigrants? So this is a two-part question. We're going to talk about advice to immigrants, first of all, and advice to immigrants' children. Okay, so first of all, to immigrants is, you know, you're coming to a new country, coming to Canada, keep your, be proud of your culture, right? Because your culture, if you think about it, is you, right? And you don't have to, obviously you have to integrate into Canada, because there's, you know, obviously all the different things that are different than maybe the country you came from, you know, the financial systems, the way you do things here, you know. But, you know, don't give up your culture, because that's something, again, it's your story, right? And if you think about it, it's so, you know, so powerful what your story is. And, you know, so when you come over to, you know, to Canada, you know, continue to do your traditions, continue to follow your, you know, all those cultural things, because that is what's going to keep you also sane as you kind of integrate into a new society here. And then for children of immigrants, right? You know, be thankful of the opportunity that you have because of your parents. right? Because if you think of, again, the struggles, the decision that they've made to uproot, and they're doing it. Why are they doing it? It's for the children, right?
The children,
the children and their children, right? So, never underestimate that. And, and I think that as children of immigrants, we see that as we grow older. We may not get it when we're kids, right? Because we don't see it. But the older you get, the more you realize what your parents did, and what an act of faith, what an act of courage, to come over and do that. So, be proud of that and be thankful for your parents for that, because if you think about it, and just like I do, okay, what would my life have been if my grandfather and my father hadn't come from Italy, right? What would your life have been if your parents didn't take that bold move and sacrifices, whatever they did to get here? How would your life be different? And when you look at that, you realize that, wow, what a blessing that we have, right?
Yes, thank you. Are there any last words, any last tips you want to add?
No, I just, like I said, I can relate to some of the challenges that immigrants have. Not totally, like I said, because I was born obviously in Canada. But, the little that I can relate, I really feel for, the struggles that you have when you come here. But I want you to know that, you can get through that, right? And there's going to be some tough days, but overall, there's going to be some good days. Just, keep the faith. Remember why you came over. Keep your family traditions, keep your culture, but take advantage of all the things that, Canada also has to offer.
Okay, thank you very much, Jay. It was my pleasure having you on the podcast, and your willingness to share with my listeners and my viewers as to some things that made you different, even though you're Canadian.
Yeah, well, you know what? I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that, because again, everybody has a story, right? We all have a story, and if you think about it, we all came from some country somewhere, right? Some of us have come recently, and some of us, like me, my parents came earlier, but we've all come here, and we all have some common struggles, and I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about that with you.
Okay, thanks, Jay.
Okay, have a good day.
You too, thanks. Thank you to today's guest, Jay Falcone of Prospero Financial Solutions Limited. Xavier Anderson for providing music. The Intentional Immigrants podcast can be found on Spotify, Google Podcast, Podbean, and YouTube. As usual, I'm your host, Yolanda Jack, reminding you, he who watches the wind will not sow. He who watches the clouds will not reap. Ecclesiastes 11, verse 4. You were born for greatness. Step out into your greatness so that mankind can benefit from you being here. So long, until next time. Remember to share, like, and subscribe. Because, of course, there are persons in your own circle who would benefit from some tips they may glean from the experiences that are shared on this podcast. So long, until next time.
We immigrants, but we are still intentional. We are dependable. It's just that set the bar, but still the best.